Welcome to Thrive in Your Third Act, where you'll hear practical tips and real life stories to help you call forward the best version of yourself. Hi, I'm ca.n, the creator of Journey to Legacy, a life story writing course where we help you feel good about the life you've lived and the lives you'll touched by writing your stories. Today's episode is an introductory episode. I wanted to take some time to share with you my own Thrive in Your Third Act story and share about what this program, what this show is all about, why I'm doing it, and how it can serve you. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. And I'm hoping, I would love it if you ended up being a regular follower of our show each Wednesday at 2 p.m. at Pacific time. So I'm going to start first with sharing a bit about my third act story, how it is that I even came to feel that thriving in your third act was something important to be sharing about. When I hit my 60s, at that point, I was still married, but we had been going through a really difficult time as a result of the 2008 financial crisis. We had invested a lot in real estate, and it had been our retirement plan, and we ended up losing everything as a result of really actually trying to save some properties, and we had some business investments. There just were a lot of things went haywire. And our marriage wasn't strong enough to survive the stress that was caused as a result of it. And so we ended up separating and then going through the process of getting divorced. And the divorce process ended up, it took quite a long time. It lasted several years. We had intended to stay friends, and yet that didn't happen. Things just didn't end up going that way. So I found myself, I'm around the age of 62, where at this point, my soon-to-be ex-husband was in a new relationship. They were posting pictures on Facebook, seemed very happy, and I was feeling alone. I was feeling scared about what it is that I was doing, and really aware of my age at that point. It was the first time where I was afraid of aging. I was looking back and thinking I'd made a lot of poor choices, wishing I had done things differently. I had a lot of regrets about the decisions that I'd made. I was aware of that sense of feeling invisible that so many women do once they reach their 50s and 60s, where they stop feeling like anyone sees them anymore. They don't get the same kind of attention that they did when they were younger. So I was sensing that. I was struggling with what it is that I was going to do to bring in income. I had been working for my husband's business, his real estate business. And so obviously that wasn't going to happen anymore. I tried to be a real estate agent, but my heart wasn't into it. I didn't really want to do that. Even though I knew real estate at the point, because I'd been working with him, it wasn't something that I really wanted to do. And so I'm looking at this and going, what is it that, what can I do now? And having that mindset that there wasn't much opportunity ahead for me. And I believed that I wasn't going to be able to be in a relationship again. I tried doing some on Match and had a little bit of contact with some people there, but was realizing how, for me, I was seeing the reality was hitting that the men that were my age were and available were looking for younger women, and there were plenty of younger women more available that didn't have the skin sagging and wrinkling and aging spots and all the things that I would look and see when I looked in the mirror. So I was in a very down state at that point in time, and I was in, I would call a victim mentality, where I was feeling hopeless. I mean, that victim mentality really means that we're we're not feeling like we have any control over our situation. We feel like we have been the recipient of things happening to us, that we are pretty helpless and pretty hopeless in trying to pull ourselves out of that situation. So I ended up choosing to, let's see, at that point, when I was in that state, something happened for me that shifted my mentality. And it was then, I found a book by Pema Chodron called When Things Fall Apart. And there were some words in there that really called to me that said, your life has been a good teacher and a good friend. And it was those words that caused me to start looking at my life in a different way. And it started the shift for me into this more empowered mentality. Something woke up in me, made me realize I was thinking, so to speak, that I was not seeing the possibilities, and that I did, in fact, have a lot to look forward to, a lot to make available to me, a lot of things ahead. And it was within my power to create that. And I just needed to make this attitude shift. But the thing that really started helping me get there was writing down stories about my life. Now, I'd never been a writer. It wasn't anything that I had done on a regular basis. I hadn't journaled on a regular basis, but the process of starting to write things down really helped me get some clarity. And I've heard this from a number of people now who are also doing life story writing, that they've had these stories in their head, but getting them down on paper creates some kind of clarity that we don't always have when we're just processing things in our head. There's an ability to see it and think about it and make some even shifts in the way that we've written about it and helping us maybe gain newer perspective. So that was happening for me as I started to do that. And around that same time too, I connected with a friend who was supporting me as I was struggling with what's next. And she asked me what it is really in my heart to do. And what I realized is that I had been through so much pain in this shift and coming into my 60s and seeing myself in this disempowered way. And what I wanted to do was to support and help others, other women who could be going through the same thing, that I was feeling the shift for me, and I was feeling a calling to be able to connect with other women in the same boat. Now, a little bit of background about me in terms of that, and I didn't connect the dots about this until I started doing my life story writing, but in the past, work that I've done, I'd always said, well, I was a counselor, I was a college dean, I was a marketing director for a program, and a wellness program in Silicon Valley. And I was always looking at the titles that I held. But it wasn't until I started looking at what it was that I had done that I realized program development had been the theme in all of the things that I had done, that I was involved in taking a program from scratch and creating something out of it. And it had been from very early on, when I was still actually in graduate school and working for an organization that served ex-offenders. And I had been given an opportunity to create an on-the-job training program for the men on parole in that organization. And I created it right from scratch. And that continued to be the way that I would approach my careers, my positions. They always somehow gave me the opportunity to create something out of nothing. So here I am thinking about serving women and realizing I have this opportunity to create something once again from scratch. And my friend said to me, that's great, you can do it, but you need a coach. And it was the first time in my life where I accepted that this is something I can't do on my own. I really don't know how to do this. I had become a techie in working with my husband. I knew technology. I had this desire to do something online, but I had never really followed through in any way, or never been successful in making anything happen. I had tried a couple of things and had this desire to start some kind of online business, but had never really been successful with it. So I accepted the fact, yeah, I need a coach, which meant investing in myself and putting forward more money than I ever had in investing and trusting in someone else to serve me. And that ended up working out for me. What came out of that was the desire and idea to hold an online summit, which I call the Sassy, Sexy, and 60 online retreat. And so this was the beginning of my Thrive in Your Third Act. Let's say my coming out, my coming forward, where I really stepped out of my comfort zone, where I decided it was time to show up and not be afraid of what people were going to think of me. I had a lot of fear of judgment. I'm a recovering people pleaser. I was worried about people judging me, using the name Sassy, Sexy, and 60, the notion of like, who do I think I am to be using a term like that for the show. And I had to push all of that aside for the first time and decide, I'm not going to give a damn what people think. I'm going to trust my heart. I'm going to trust what's in me, and I'm going to move forward with this. And so it was a huge mountain for me to climb, but I did it. And I got to the other side of it. And what came out of that was this beautiful mailing list, because people signed up for the online retreat. And I had this list now of people to serve. And I'm like, well, now what do I do? So I started writing, and I just started writing on a weekly basis and in a weekly email. And in that email, I started sharing more about myself. I started sharing my story in my email, and I found it to be incredibly cathartic. I found it to be empowering. And I was allowing myself to be a little more vulnerable each time I went to share, and asking myself, what's true about me here? Because I wanted to come across as perfect. I wanted to be impressive. I wanted to say all the right things. And I had to let that perfectionist part of me go and be willing to show my imperfections, be willing to show my vulnerability, and to connect with people in that way. So I just started doing that without really knowing where it was going to lead me. And so I did that for about 6 months and was continuing to ask for guidance from spirit in terms of what's next. Where should I go with this? And one day, the idea of my program, Journey to Legacy, came to me. And it was this I realized the term legacy was I was holding a lot of energy around that, and recognizing that not only now that I, as well as so many other women that I know, have looked back at my life, they've looked back on their life, and as we've discussed it, have felt like, yeah, there's been good moments, but not really feeling that sense of pride of what it is that we have to share, and not really connected with the wisdom of what it is that we've learned, and not necessarily seeing the past from that perspective of the lessons and the blessings. And so something in me said, this is time. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is my calling. And so I went with that, and I just ended up, more that I dove into it, the clearer the picture became as to how that program was going to unfold. And I mean, I literally saw it in my mind. And as I was writing it, it became clear that this is what I'm supposed to, this is how I'm supposed to present it. These are the women that I'm supposed to serve. And so all of this kind of fell into place for me. And so 2 years ago is when I started my program, Journey to Legacy. And it's been a beautiful experience. I have been so honored to serve the women who have been part of that program. And we're now we're coming to the close of our 4th season of it, and gearing up to start our 5th in July. And then, so that's going on in the background. And then in fall of last year, a dear friend of mine reached out to me and told me about this opportunity to have this show on Win-Win Women, to have my own show. And I was like, I don't know that I want to do that. It seems like a huge commitment. I'm not. And all of those those thoughts again, those disempowering beliefs started coming back into my head. Those thoughts of like, this isn't something I can do. Who am I to think that I could do something like this? What do I have to say? And I was just again a repeat of the stories that I was telling myself years ago. I mean, once we have these stories in our head, they're going to keep popping up. So it's a matter of like getting them into some manageable format. But so that came up for me, and I was able to work through, and connecting with her and her encouragement about that. I was able to say, all right, this is right for me. This is something that I'm going to trust it. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'm going to trust it. And so I went ahead and made the commitment to do the show. And then decided, again, it was kind of like my mailing list. All right, now what do I do? Here it is. I've made this commitment. And I had also last fall done what's called a one-day talk show called Your Magnificent Third Act. And it was a huge success. It was something that I had 5 other speakers, and then including me, there were 6 of us. And we talked about different topics related to women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. And we had a great response. And I loved the topic. I loved the idea of women supporting women to feel empowered during this time of their life. And so that stuck with me. And I thought, I want to stick with that theme of the third act. And that's when the name Thrive in Your Third Act came. It came to me, and I decided that's what I want to call this show. So that's how it all began. And I started by having some just playing around with different episodes. At the time, we weren't streaming yet on Roku or Amazon Prime or on Apple TV. So that wasn't an option. We were still kind of in beta format, and I was playing around with it. And even when we went in January, where it went live, where it was an option, I still wasn't ready to go forward with it. I still didn't feel that I was properly prepared. And so I've been playing around with the format and decided that really what this should be all about is sharing stories. And that what I want this show, in the way that I want this show to serve you, those of you who are watching it, is to have people on here, both people who maybe have, are already seen in various elements. Maybe they've written a book, or maybe they have their own show, or maybe they have their own online course, and also have women who don't necessarily have that, but have either, maybe been through my program or have done other things in their life that are really, I mean, we all have amazing stories, but to bring people in who aren't, so to speak, known in the online world, and to share the stories that are in their heart, because we all have stories. And that my hope in doing so is that in you watching it, that you'll get something from it, that you'll be able to connect either with what it is that the person is sharing, or what it is that, or maybe something that someone might find a benefit, and you could invite them to watch the show. And that those who are sharing their story can realize what an impact they can make by being willing to do that. I think that so often there's this belief, and this is something that I hear regularly, is that what women saying, what I have to share isn't that special, isn't that unique. And yet, once we start connecting with our story and finding what we call the universal truth, then we do realize how impactful our stories can be. So the universal truth is that golden thread that connects us all. It's the point of our story that can be true for me, and it can be true for you, and it can be true for so many others who are listening. It's those times where we didn't believe in ourselves, and yet the universe created the situation where we had no choice but to move forward and to pull up our strength. And we found that we had so much more than we ever knew. And from that, we learned that we did have the capacity to get through this difficult time. Or it's the believing that, we could never survive the loss of a home in a fire, and yet going through that, having everything that we care about taken from us, all of our possessions, recognizing that those didn't matter in the way that life matters, and to be so grateful for the life that we have and that we can rebuild our lives, and seeing these opportunities that we've seen as such, such hardships, as we look back on them and realize, yeah, that was difficult. And at the same time, I've made it through that. There's also beautiful stories of joy and happiness, and sharing those can help us reconnect with those parts of ourselves. So it's this opportunity within this show to hear from other women, hear their wisdom, hear their strengths, hear what they have to share, and help them connect with that parts of themselves that they might not have even been in touch with, of what it is that they had to share. One of the things that's very fun for me as I interview women is I love it to be non-scripted. I'll invite people who are coming on the show to share some of their questions that they would like me to ask. And I may or may not follow those questions, because it's so nice to just follow the flow of the conversation. And so often in this unfolding is where we uncover some of the deeper meanings of our stories, where we even find clues about ourselves or another person that we hadn't seen were there. I had a client who said that one of the beautiful things about life story writing is that our life is like this glass jar, and within it are these big rocks that are the events in our life that we know are significant: the marriages, the births, the divorces, the career changes, or the career success, the raising of the family. Like we know them, we've thought about them, we've maybe even have processed some of the challenges that we've had with them in therapy. But it's the little rocks, the little stories that are the little rocks that we tend to forget. And it's through that process of sharing our story and going back and looking at our story, and maybe even starting with those big rocks, that we start to remember the little rocks and start to realize that there's a lot more there to the little rocks that we've been holding on to, carrying weight around as a result, carrying this kind of the baggage of the weight of the little rocks that we haven't really processed, haven't really examined. And by doing so, we get to release some of the shame, the guilt, the resentment, the anger that we may have been carrying related to those little rocks. So there's this beautiful unfolding that happens when we allow ourselves to take this step into our past. So some people are fearful about going back there. Some people are worried what might be uncovered, but that's where that victim mindset versus empowered mindset can really play a strong part as we think about our stories and revisiting our stories. Because when we recognize that we've survived, we've made it through, and here we are in this moment, and we have a lot to celebrate, that fear of going back and can change when we recognize that there are a variety of perspectives, and that maybe what we've been holding on to and the story we've been telling ourselves about a particular situation could be looked at a little bit differently. And in doing so, it might help us release some of the fear or some of the resentment or some of the blame or some of the shame that we're carrying around that story. So my hope in you watching this show is that you'll get to hear some of these stories unfold. You'll get to see how other women have been able to bring new perspective to their life, how other women have survived some very difficult times, how other women have connected with their strength, their wisdom, and are here now to share their story in a way that can hopefully touch you, hopefully touch the lives of perhaps those you touch, and will hopefully inspire you to see that your life has been and is your legacy, and it's worthy of being recalled, reframed, and remembered. So I look forward to having you here on a regular basis. If you watch live, we will have this Q&A session or open chat session in the second half hour of the show. If you watch on the video replays, then love to hear from you. You're welcome to send comments to me at Joanna at Journey to Legacy. And if life story writing is something that appeals to you for yourself, then I invite you to go to my website and check out my free gift, which is a Write Your Authentic Story starter kit. And it will help you start to recall some memories. Getting inspiration is always something that people worry about, and it will help you get some inspiration. It will give you some tools for that and give you the beginning of a structure to start writing down some stories. So I invite you to start the process and see what it does for you. And then, of course, continue to come and visit us here each week while we share practical tips and real life stories to help you call forward the best version of yourself. Thank you for being here.